Hello everyone, this is Tapasya, and in this audio, we are going to learn about Nagamandala. We'll be critically analyzing this particular play, which has been written by Girish Karnad. Now, Nagamandala was published in 1990. Originally, it was written in Kannada, and later, the dramatist transcreated it into English. Now, Nagamandala is a feminist play which not only exposes male chauvinism, the oppression of women, the great injustice done to them by men, and the patriarchal culture, but also deflates the concept of chastity. The purport of the folk tale is seemingly to uphold the institution of marriage. It turns the unhappy married life of Rani into a happy one. However, at the same time, owing to its inherent quality of subversion, the same folk tale deconstructs the idea that fulfillment of love and desires is found within the sacred predicts of married life. So, is the fulfillment achievable within the marriage or outside it? Is the question concealed with the very framework of Hayavadana as well as Nagamandala. Now, if you interpret the meaning, Nagamandala is a folk tale that transformed into the metaphor of married women. It is a Chinese box story with two folk tales transformed into one fabric, where myth and superstitions, fact and fantasies, instinct and reason, the particular and the general blend to produce a drama with universal evocations. The predicaments of Rani, as exposed in the name, is deplorable than of a maid. The name Rani ridicules at the Indian idols of womanhood as the Rani or Lakshmi of the household. Now, as Virginia Woolf asserts in a room of one's own, imaginatively, she is of importance, practically insignificant. She pervades poetry from cover to cover, is all but absent from history. Now, if we talk about the phases of womanhood portrayed in Nagamandala, you will see that the women portrayed as the dependent in all the three phases of her life. As a daughter, where Rani is being depending on her parents. As a wife, she is again reliable on Apanna. And as a mother, Kurudavas, handicap without Kapanna. So in Indian society, the woman is said to be complete only after marriage. However, paradoxically, she neither belongs to this world of her house or that is her parents' home or her husband's adobe. So for the woman, the house is said to be an expression of her freedom It is her domain. However, Rani is imprisoned in her own house by her spouse in a routine manner that baffles others with door locked from outside. She does not shut the door behind her like Nora does in A Doll's House. But God opens a door for her in form of a king cobra. The king cobra gets seduced by the love potion provided by Kurudava to Rani to lure pathetically her own husband, who turns a blind eye to her. The snake assumes the form of a loving Apanna, in contrast to the Artokius husband at day. The climax is reached with when Rani becomes pregnant and Apanna questions her chastity. Her innocence is proved by virtue of the snake ordeal that the village elders put before her, and she is eventually proclaimed a goddess incarnate. Now, if we try to critically comment on Apanna in Nagamandala, we would see that Apanna literally means any man and points to the metaphor of a man in general. His chauvinistic the stance and towering dominance to the extent of suppressing a woman's individuality. Rani endeavors to discover her individuality by seeking refuge in dreams, fairy tales, and fantasies to escape the sordid reality of her existence. At an age where the typical fantasy would be a sultan or prince coming on horseback, Rani's flight of imagination transports her to a seventh heaven, where her parents wait for her. Now, critics show her the body of a site of confinement, violence, regulation, and communication of the victimized gender, that is, self. And they also point out how she later uses the same body to rebel, to subvert, and to negotiate her space in society. Apanna possesses her as an adulterous woman, whereas he himself has an explicit relation with a concubine. He and his hypocritical society questions Rani's chastity and side, steps the validity of Apanna's principles. This is just a minuscule which has been mandatory to establish the purity of a woman, while a man's mere word is taken for the truth. So whether it is Sita, Shakuntala, or Rani in this instance. Now, if you appreciate the author for this play, you'll remark the identity of the tales in general, about their reality of being and their continuance only on being passed on. The objectivity leads us to perceive the story as concept with its own existence and identity, and to emphasize its individuality. It is personified in form of woman. In this case, V. Rangan says, a story is born and grows. It has life. Each story has an independent existence and a distinctive character. All story or all storytellers are ancient marines, cursed to keep the story alive. The story seems to echo that in order to live, a story has to be told and retold. That is, the story has no role without the listener or perceiver, and cannot help thinking that whether the author is stressing the reader's role in constructing meaning or phenomenology. The reader response theory questions the endurance of the author's viewpoint that has no existence without the reader's perception. Being told and retold is nothing but interpretation and reinterpretation. Therefore, any literary piece is only an object without the reader breathing meaning into it. So, for the story to survive, it must be ultimately passed on. The drawback of the flames emphasizes the idea of passing on. Otherwise, the flames in the story were attributed with not having the quality of passing on. However, this is what they were precisely doing at the outset. Therefore, passing on has a wider ramifications here that merely physically transmitting. Again, The playwright is a man, and the story is personified as a woman. So, does man create woman? However, the playwright echoes that story has an autonomous existence and love by virtue of interpretation and reinterpretation. Likewise, a woman has her own existence and lives by virtue of meaningful procreation. Thus, the gist of the framework of the story runs parallel to the theme of the main story. As Rani's role gets inverted at the end of the story, and Apanna turns into a mere instrument to prove her divinity. Likewise, roles get reversed as the playwright, a man who tells stories, listens to the story, a woman. Now, Apanna has a split personality according to this story. The playwright hits the nail on the head when he asserts at the outset that the idol is broken so that the presiding deity of the temple cannot be identified. Apanna is the king of his castle, a supreme egoist. He is the prototype of Indian masculinity that asserts itself by arresting the spouse selfhood within the four walls of the house. Apanna literally cages his wife in his dwelling, as she is subject to unmerited abuses and the intentions. Naga or snake, with all its phallic connotations, typifies the sexual side of Apanna. It is the other side of Apanna, which he himself cannot bring to acceptance. For his sexual impulses, for him, is being submissive to his wife. Therefore, though these two aspects are completely disjoint, there are two sides of the same coins. Heads and tails. Heads, the ego, and tails, the snake, following its instincts. That Naga is Apanna. from a very outset or from the beginning of the Naga's entrance. Now, how does Naga revisits these facts? So, from Act 2, we would understand that when Naga says, locked up in house all day, you must be missing your parents. So, this offer ample proof that Naga is none other than Apanna, as Rani cannot and has no scope for communication with outsiders. Naga is Apanna. At night, he stood to the limit of coaxing Rani for his own instinctual needs. He renders himself loving and soothing at night. So paradoxically, he sets a watch dog against his own self at night. This symbolically represents the guard he sets against his own instinct. That proves to be futile. Therefore, the tussle with himself, he gets defeated without accepting defeat, and the scar remains. The husband who inflicts injury at day becomes the pharmacon at night. The spouse who is the master at day becomes submissive to his wife at night against his own will. So, in this, B.T. Sita states that instinct as a creative force reigns supreme in the class or place of Karnad. So, let's say that the husband decides on the day visits and the wife on the night visits. So, if we talk about these things, however, we'll understand that the subconsciousness of mind, the knowledge remains, the knowledge of duality, the dissociative disorder still remains. He does not want to face question as to the existence of his quality, and it is sometimes that he would prefer to deny than accept. A mirror to his split is too much for him to digest. The shielding of him from the mirror is the fact. So for Rani, this is decisive point. The mirror stands for the crucial point of self-realization that Apanna's exclusive interest in her is purely sexual. This is why she retreats and refrains from making love to him when she sees his reflection in the mirror. She comprehends that there is no behavioral patterns of Apanna manifesting itself. Like while asking Rani to adhere the unquestioning obedience. Naga, he says that when I come and go at night, don't go out of the room, don't look out of the window, and don't even ask me why about it. So these are the unquestioning obedience or obedient questions. Now Rani likens herself to the whale but does not know why. She thinks herself to be a creature without any rational power, only with the basic instincts. She is now even attributed the power to think and is caged like an animal. In short, she does not possess any persona or any identity. Her singularity is defined in terms of her husband's whims and fancies. There are various references to animals to exemplify the predominance of the instincts or impulse. The death of the dog implies the death of his will, or you would say willpower. And therefore, you'll see the dog that was initially brought for human intruder proves to be futile. So, on the death of the dog, he buys a mongoose as a guard. Is a mongoose a guard of human intruders? Certainly not, I guess. However, it is for the snake or Apanna's sexual self that he sets a watchdog at the beginning itself. The mongoose is evidence enough. It says that the mongoose has given a tougher fight because the mongoose has no sign of him for the next several days, and when he does arrive, his body was covered with wounds that had only partly healed. Now, consciously, if we see, Naga is not aware of Apanna, and Apanna refuses to acknowledge Naga. Perhaps self awareness does not creep in at the climax when it most obvious to us. Now, if you come to the climax of this story, you'll see that she turns away. Naga takes the steps to go. They both freeze. The light change sharply from night to midday. In a flash, Naga becomes Apanna, pushes her to the floor and kicks her. So, what exactly we are finding in Nagamandala is there are identity crises. So, here the patriarchal hierarchy is explicit in expressionist term. For Apanna, the fact that his wife has committed adultery is more acceptable to conscious mind than the fact himself is Naga. For outsiders, the snake ordeal is test to prove the chastity of Rani. However, in reality, the rest is for Apanna to ascertain whether he himself is Naga. When the test ultimately does prove positive, the truth dawns that is Apanna is equal to Naga, and therefore he had submitted to Rani, and therefore she has triumphed over him, and it elevates to the status of goddesses, hence a more domesticated, humble Naga. We should also remember that the playwright has proposed three endings for this particular play. So, in the first, they lived happily ever after. Both Naga and Apanna fuse into one on one self realization. Second ending is Naga suicides for one of the two selves to survive coherently. The other must suicide, or an emotional suicide, you would say. The third ending is both Naga and Apanna coexist, and the history repeats. So, finally, we'll see that some critics questioning the identity of the play itself, that is Nagamandala, as a folk play, like George asserts that there is indeed a marginal difference between the real lore of the folk and the lore that what is represented and constructed as folklore. He utilizes the term fake lore to address the latter. So he defines folklore as that which represents the life of the people in close communion with nature, and that which is orally transmitted. Now, fake lore, on the other hand, is represented of folklore by outsiders for a specific purpose. Therefore, while folklore is the signifier of the signified, fake lore is the signifier of a signifier of a signified. So, if you remember Jack Derrida, if you remember Ferdinand Saussure, you'll remember the sign, signifier, and signified. It is a fake drama in representation according to Jos George. It reminds one of the Plato's theory of idea as something twice removed from reality. So, however, Carnad himself counters this when he says, drama is not for me a means of self expression, but drama can be the production of meaning also. So the story has an autonomous existence. Now, when we conclude it, so to conclude that Girish Karnad's play Nagamandala as a split personality and identity crisis It interprets the ancient themes in modern context, like Yayati, the common man of today, is grouped in the darkness of material and sensual pleasures. He finds himself in the world in which old spiritual values have been entirely swept away, and the new spiritual values are yet to be discovered. So the so if we find Girish Karnad's interpretation of the old myth on the exchange of ages between father and son puzzled and angered conventional crisis, but the enlightened readers and critics appreciated it for its modernity. Now, it was originally written in Kannada and now it has been translated into English. So, Mrs. P. Krishnaveni had tried to uh, judge it as a comparative study of myth and folk elements in Girish Karnad's Nagamandala and Hayavadana. Okay, and if we understand or know much about this particular play, we need to understand that in Nagamandala the snake changes into a man, where uh, you know the theme in this play also reveals the Upanishads principles that visualize the human body as a symbol of organic relationship, or the part to the whole. So it sacrifices also, or you would say sacrifice is also a form of part of such religious practices as seen in the obligations of the self physicals. And you'll also see that the snake ordeal that Rani undergoes in Nagamandala, or the spiritual thoughts and wisdom inherent in a religion, are also incorporated into the themes of this play. So, since we have understood what Nagamandala is and how critically it could be analyzed, let me talk about our playwright, that is Girish Karnad. Now, Girish Karnad was a Hodeus scholar at Oxford. He has served as a director of the Films and Television Institution of India. He was also the chairman of the Sangeet Natak Academy, and he was the director of the Nehru Centre, London. So, the most important thing to remember is that he has received the Sahitya Akademi Award, and he had received it at a Janapit, and this is known to be one of the highest distinction for lifetime contribution to literature. And he has also been decorated with Padma Bhushan. So, as a career as a dramatist, he has been paralleled by an equally celebrated career as an actor, screenwriter, and director of the film and television. And this play has brought Karnataka Sahitya Academy Award of 1989 for Karnad in the category of the most creative work of the year. Now this play Nagamandala was being directed by Vijaya Mehta in German, and in the Festival of India in Germany in 1992, and it was performed at the University Theatre of Chicago and subsequently at the theatre in Minneapolis as the part of 30th anniversary celebration in 1993. So what we have seen is the play Nagamandala is being divided into a prologue and two acts, and it is based on two folk tales of Kannada. So to sum up the audio, we need to understand about Nagamandala and its prologue that there is a deep symbolic significance of a setup of the flames, ruined temples, story, and man. Okay, because the flames are representing the evils that prevailed in the society, and the society is made up of individuals. And if individuals are not good in characters and nature, definitely the society will be filthy. And you'll also see that how modern people are becoming miser, losing respect to the parents and elders, and blocking to communicate the cultural and traditional heritage to the next generation. And at the same time, the ruined temple symbolizes the decaying structure of the society where the morals and ethics are vanishing day by day. So, interestingly, we have seen that man in this scene shown by the playwright represents that still reforms are possible. It is the play that the man has to awake one whole night, and only then he can save his life. So, what is it symbolizing? It is symbolizing the modern generation who is standing at the 11th hour of its demise. So, the playwright symbolically suggests that if modern men connect themselves with their roots, they can survive. And Karnad presents the appalling states of women in the Indian society. And in the story and the theme of Nagamandala is being taken from the folk tale which he heard from A.K. Ramanujan. So Ramanujan talked about a prince whose extreme mistrust of women prevent him for any woman and who encounter with the women's desire for love. Now Ramanujan writes about the tale as many as 40 variants, but the central theme of this tale is, as Ramanujan has remarked, that is narcissism of the self-involved hero who undergoes a test put to him by the wife in order to survive. So, the psychological inadequacy that the young man is caught in to prevent his self transcendence or causing acute lack of understanding and communication between him and the women. So, what exactly we are learning is there is an instill of alienation effect by driving the material of the play from the folk tales and also by using the non materialistic techniques. So, I believe you might have understood the audio where we have learned how Naga is the Indian mythology and even the Indian tale which is referred to the power of creation. So that's all for this audio. Thank you so much for listening this audio.